shiur on this Mishnah together. Just to give a quick recap on what we're doing overall. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai has 5 Talmidim. He's praised them all. He's given them all a mission of going out and finding what's positive in the world that we finished discussing. Then he now, on today's section, he gives them a new mission of going out and finding what the negative path is that they should distance themselves from. And then after this Mishnah, we're going to go through each of those Talmidim one by one and see what they uniquely have to say. Each of them has 3, maybe 3, it says it's 3, it's not always 3, statements of what they uniquely are giving over, not in respect to their Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Today we're going to conclude the mission that we've been on for the last week, which is the negative side. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says to his Talmidim, Amar lehem tze'u u'ra'u, eizuhi derech ra'a she'itrachek mimena ha'adam. Go and see what is that path, which is a bad path, which a man should distance himself from. Now, in line with what we were speaking about until now, again, he's not looking here for psukim, he's not looking here for sources from the Torah. He's telling them to go out to the world and look what you've seen from your experience of the world, that if people do this path, if they follow this negative path, then that will lead them to do not just this bad thing, but to an entirely bad, mindset. So Rabbi Eliezer says the same as he said before, just in reverse. Ayin Ra'ah, so does Rabbi Yeshua. Chavera, so does Rabbi Yossi. Shachen Ra'ah, skipping one. So does Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, says, that we spoke about yesterday, says Levra. And then he concludes, Ro'eh ani es divrei Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, shebichlal divarav divrechem, same as yesterday. So there was one exception of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says a different thing to what he said in the first Mishnah. He doesn't just say the opposite. Rabbi Shimon, in the first time when he was told on the positive path, he was said, Ro'eh hasanolad, you see that which is coming. And we said his trait was someone who has yirei chet. So someone who has yirei chet is always aware of what possible things could happen. He's careful not to go into those places. But the opposite is not that. The opposite doesn't say Ein Ro'eh hasanolad, like would be the opposite with all the other ones. Rather, it says, Haloveh ve'eino meshalem, someone who borrows but doesn't repay. And then, totally uncharacteristic of the rest of the Mishnah, it now brings an extra phrase and a pasuk to back it up. It says, Echad haloveh min adam, one who borrows from man, koloveh min makom, is like he's borrowing from Hashem. Shene'emar loveh rasha v'lo yishalem, as the pasuk says, a person who borrows is wicked and he doesn't pay back. A righteous person, chonein v'notein, grants and returns and gives. So we have here 2 major questions that we're going to discuss. Question number 1 is, why does Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai send them on another mission to find a negative path when you see in 4 out of the 5 cases, there's no difference between the positive path and the negative path. It's just the same thing in reverse. If that's the majority way of just not doing the opposite, then you could presume that's a given. Why does he have to send them on a separate mission? Right? He says, Amar lehem tzeu. He says to them again, go out and see a new mission, a new discovery of what the negative path is. What's the purpose in his mission of sending them out a second time? That's our question on Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And our question on Rabbi Shimon is, why didn't he just bring the opposite? Why did Rabbi Shimon go and look for a new idea and not just say the opposite of the first idea, like all the other Tanaim did who came before him? So I want to pause for a second and just tell a little story, which is going to help give us an answer on this first point. This is a made-up story, but I think everyone could fit in their own version of this to their own lives. There was once a boy who had an issue. Now you can make up any issue here, but I'm choosing an issue of addiction to watching things on the internet, not even inappropriate things, but just, you know, when you finish the one movie and it goes around like this and the next one starts and the next one starts. So he just was watching one and watching another one and watching another one. And he was getting to a point where he was wasting a lot of his time on that. Not only the time he was doing it, but also in the mental battle of should he look or shouldn't he look. And then after he wasn't looking, he was sitting at home, but then he, learning the base medrash, but then all different things that he was thinking about from the things that he'd seen came and disturbed him. And it was something which was pretty overwhelming in his life. It was affecting him in a major way. So he went to his Rebbe to speak about it. And his Rebbe heard, and the Rebbe seemed like it was beyond him. The Rebbe didn't have the skills or the tools to discuss, to help this boy. So he said to him, well, maybe you should speak to someone professional. So the boy said, that would be a really good idea. How much does it cost? So the Rebbe said, well, it costs 300 shekels, and that's really cheap. He says it costs 300 shekels a time. So he says, well, my issue isn't such a big issue. I think I can handle it. Like 300 shekels a time, that seems quite expensive. When I think about it, I think I can actually resolve it by myself. I don't need to go for therapy. Or it could be, he says, don't worry, just tell your parents. They'll be happy to help you fund the therapy. So he says, tell my parents. Actually, I think I can overcome it by myself. I'm pretty sure I can handle it. Now, what just happened over there? It's interesting. Sometimes a person is aware that if they would follow a path which would be good for them, they have a lot to benefit. So when this Rebbe started speaking to the Talmud, he said to him, what would you gain by not watching those movies anymore? And the Talmud starts on all the positive things and says, well, I would be more focused in my learning, and I would have more time to learn, and I would overcome the constant struggle in my mind of should I look or shouldn't I look? And to be honest, there are some things there that are inappropriate, so I would have a more pure sense of mind. So the boy's saying, I have so much to gain, I have so much to gain, I have so much to gain, I have a pure mindset. That's all very good. Then suddenly comes the fact you have to tell your parents, or the fact that it costs money. And suddenly the boy, all those positive things don't seem to be helping him at this moment. And he says, well, I think I can manage it by myself. So the Rebbe says, well, how long have you been trying to manage it by yourself? So he says, well, it's been a good 3-4 years now that I've been struggling with this. So he says, so do you think you'll be able to manage it by yourself? He says, yeah, I'm pretty sure I can. It's not such a big deal. It's not such a big deal. So he says, okay, well, make a time by when you think that we could discuss it again, that if it's not working by yourself, that you could then, reassess. So the boy says, I'll give it a month. Fine, you give it a month. So the boy comes away after a month, and the Rebbe says to him, so how did it go? He says, well, the first day I thought about what you said, didn't do anything, but I just thought about it. And then I didn't think about it for the next 29 days. So the Rebbe says, so do you think it's worthwhile sharing with your parents now that this is an issue? So he said, no, I'm sure I can work it out. I'm pretty sure. And month after month, he's still sure that he's going to work it out. And that carries on for many years. Some people who smoke have this same issue, where the reason why they continue smoking for 30 or 40 years is because every day they say, I could stop now if I wanted to. Nothing's holding me back. Any day now I could stop. If I wanted to stop, I would stop. So what's the chokhmah that's behind what's going on over here? And this is crucial understanding. When a person has an understanding of what he wants and what he could potentially gain, then that gives him a goal. That gives him direction. And that's a crucial first step. A person needs to know where I'm headed, what my goals are, what am I aiming for. But that won't be enough to enable him to accomplish his goals if he's not aware of what he stands to lose by not following through. And this point is very interesting. Positive encouragement doesn't encourage us in the same way as fear of negative, right? So if I were to tell you, you could gain by walking over there and doing something, then you would weigh it up. Is it worth it for me? Is it not worth it for me? But if I would say to you, where you're standing now, it's about to explode, or there's a line on the loose just over here, then that would be much more of a motivating factor for you to move over there. So you could say that the push factors are stronger than the pull factors. Meaning, if you have something motivating and encouraging you, that's healthy, and you need that because now you know which way to go. But if you're not deeply aware of all the evil, then you won't have the will to overcome tiny hurdles that come up in your way. I'm sure everyone knows the famous Gemara that there was a Rasha and a Tzaddik who die. And when they get to the next world, then the Tzaddik looks back and he sees behind him a mountain, an enormous mountain. And he says, what is that? And he said, that's the Yetzer Hara. And he says, how did I overcome that? I'm not even sure how I did that. And then the Rasha comes and he sees this tiny hair, a hair in front of him. Right? And he says, what's this little hair on the floor? And they say, that's your Yetzer Hara. And he says, well, that's not getting in my way. Why couldn't I just step over it? And that's the difference between someone who's a tzaddik and a Rasha. a Rasha, really, it's only one tiny, tiny, tiny step. But he views that as the biggest hurdle. In his mind, that tiny step is like overwhelming and too much to overcome. And therefore, he's held back from taking a step which wouldn't be difficult. But because in his mind, it's something very big. He's not aware that it's really bad. The tzaddik saw it as a mountain. The tzaddik was very, very much aware that it was bad. And he saw it as a mountain. And therefore, he took it very seriously. And that's why he was able to overcome it. The Rasha sees that it's not really a big deal. It's just a hair. I could step over it at any point that I would ever decide to step over it. What's the big deal over here? But he never steps over it. But because he sees it so small and insignificant, he doesn't realize how bad the bad is. So he never takes the step towards working on it. So if we go back to our story of that boy, if his Rebbe would have, or if his therapist or whoever it would be, would speak to him, and instead of going on the positive, what would you gain, which is also important to do, he would also take the negative side of it and say to him, what are you currently losing out by doing this? Not just what could you gain if you would overcome it, but what are you currently losing out by doing this? And he would go in depth into how it's causing him to feel depressed and it's causing him to feel worthless. You have to go into a lot of depth to get to the core of how bad it really is, of how he's losing tremendously by following this path. And then later, if you've gone down that whole path with him and he sees how it's ruining his life, it's going to affect his marriage, it's affecting his learning, it's affecting his goals of wanting to become a Talmid Chacham. He's having to keep secrets from his friends and his family, which is making him all awkward and anxious, and he's lying and trying to cover up the lies. And it goes down the whole path of recognizing how really bad the situation is now. Not chas v'shalom to make him upset about it, but just to make him realize how bad it is. Then later on, when you would say to him, is it worth telling your parents, or is it worth putting out 300 shekels? He would say, no, I think I can manage. He would say, you think you can manage? Okay. But is it worth it if it means having to lie and having to feel anxious and having to not be able to sleep properly at night and having to miss shacharis in the morning and not being able to learn throughout the day and being distracted when you're trying to learn and distracted in davening? Is it worth it? And he would say, actually, it is pretty bad. Meaning, when he's trying to say to you, it's not so bad, then you say, okay, not so bad. Let's see your definition of not so bad. And you go through all the things that he just said. And you say, well, according to, is that not bad? And he'll say, actually, it is bad. And he can't go back now because he's just told you how bad it really is. He's become deeply aware of how it is bothering him. Then he'll have that skill to be able to say, okay, I'll overcome the hurdle. I see there's a hurdle, but I'm willing to overcome it. That's what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was doing with his Talmidim. He was saying to them, I know you've gone out and seen what the positive path is. That was a good first step. But now I'm sending you on another mission. Go out and see. Because if it's not clear to you how the bad path is bad, then you won't have the wherewithal, with the encouragement, the strength, the enthusiasm to go and follow that path of good. Because whenever the path of good comes your way, you'll say, it's good, but okay, the other path is not so bad. No, my friend. It's not good or okay. That's not the two options here. It's Hinei natati lefanecha et hatov ve'et hara et hachayim ve'et hamavet. Those are the two options. There's no option of, you could either be a super righteous tzaddik or you could be a regular tzaddik. And I'll go with the regular tzaddik who has to have such a great portion in Gan Eden. I'm happy to have a comfortable life in this world and an okay portion in Gan Eden. That's not the way it's working. It's either or. You please notice the bad side is very bad and there's negative paths you're going to take. And only when if Talmidim have got on that path and recognized that and seen the good and the bad and seen how the bad is really bad and recognized, actually, I don't want to follow that path and therefore I'm willing to overcome the hurdles, will they be able to follow the good path? So that was point number one, which is a very important principle, which I think everyone here could contemplate. And if there's anything here that you wish to overcome and you find that you're having trouble overcoming it, look into yourself. It may be that some place in you're justifying that it's not actually so bad. But if you would be honest and just put that whatever hurdles aside for a minute and you would say, what's not bad over here? And you start delineating the whole thing out and saying, well, what I'm doing is affecting me in all these ways, then you would say, well, maybe it is worth taking efforts to overcome it because it really is affecting me in a very negative way. And let's stop justifying that so that I can overcome that. And that was what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was doing by giving them this second mission of looking what's bad in the world. Fantastic. Now, with all that in mind, let's go to our second question, Rabbi Shimon. Why doesn't Rabbi Shimon give the opposite of what he said initially? Initially, he said, Ro'eh es hanoilad, and now he says, Loveh ve'eino meshalem. Now, this really is an exception, because although all the other ones are either Chaim v'maves, but this one is not Chaim v'maves. This is something different. This is more like being a chosid. This is what I'm quoting you now is Rabbeinu Yonah. Rabbeinu Yonah says that this one of Ro'eh es hanolad really is an exception, because there are some mitzvahs like all the other four that were mentioned, which is either or, it's either good or bad, it's either Chaim or maves, and therefore you have to know the negative. But this one is not like that. This one is more of being a midas chasidus. If you're able to predict the future and know all the effects of what's going to happen in the future, then you're going to have a plus, you're going to have a bonus. You'll be able to foresee things that will be in the future. But if you can't do that, or if you don't do that, but all you do is any situation that comes your way, you look at that situation and you say, what should I do? How can I do the will of Hashem in the situation that stands in front of me? Then you're a tzaddik. This really is a difference between being a chosid or being a tzaddik. If I can predict the future and I can look forward and I can see all the long-term effects, and that's an amazing thing, and I hope I can do that. That will be a good path to take. But if I don't do that, but I'm still always asking myself, what should I do the will of Hashem with the fact that I have in front of me now? I'm not going to be held accountable for that. I'm still doing a good thing. So you can't say the good path to take is Ro'eh es Nolad, and the evil path to take is not Ro'eh es Nolad. That's not evil. That's something which you're maybe missing opportunities of reaching higher levels, but you can't call that evil. So Rabbi Shimon now is trying to look for a different path. Now in the Rishonim, there are two different approaches. Either he just looked for something else, or he is looking for something else, but he's still looking for something which is the opposite of what he first said. Not the exact opposite of Ro'eh es Nolad and not Ro'eh es Nolad, but something which will be the opposing side. So on a simple level, you could just say very simply like this. You could say, someone who's Ro'eh es Nolad, then he plans ahead, he looks to the future. The opposite of that would be someone who would take a loan and he wouldn't exactly know how to repay it. Meaning, you're not supposed to take a loan if you don't have a plan of how eventually you're going to repay it. So if I'm taking a loan now because I want to marry off my daughter, but I know that I'm going to be working over the next 12 months, and I'm going to be putting aside money each of those next 12 months, and therefore I will be able to repay this loan. That's a healthy way of taking a loan. But if I don't have money for food, and I'm also not going to have money for next month's food, then where's that going to come from? Am I relying on a miracle? That's the opposite of Ro'eh es Nolad. Ro'eh es Nolad is where you plan for the future. This is not planning for the future. So that would be a simple opposite one. It doesn't really explain, though, that answer doesn't really explain why Rabbi Shimon needs to say this whole extra phrase of Echad aloves min ha'adam koloves ha'makom and bring a posuk. So although it is a good parallel, we hear that parallel, we like it. We're going to go with that at an initial stage, but we're looking for something a little deeper in order to understand what the whole flow is over here. And now we're going to use Rashi as our guide. Rashi says something very, very interesting. Let's just step out a minute and then we'll go back into Rashi. HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world beyond what we see in front of our eyes. So a nice example of that is, the Maseches Rosh Hashanah says that at the beginning of the year, on Rosh Hashanah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu determines how much money a person is going to have. And as long as he puts in the normal hishtadlus, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is determined for him how much he will have, and therefore he can spend money freely on chinuch bonim and on Shabbos needs and on Yom Tov needs. He doesn't have to be concerned. That's outside of the realm that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him. Now, it could be that you can't see that with your own eyes, exactly how that's going to happen. It could be that only someone who's on a very, very high level will be able to see how normally washing machines break down and people have expenses, and they who are learning Torah more and are trusting in Hashem are not having those expenses, and they can see how the whole thing fits together in an amazing way. But in a natural way, you wouldn't be able to see that. Only someone with emunah-oriented eyes would be able to see that. So there's a natural order of the world, and there's a God order of the world that runs behind it. I want to give a parable here, which you may have heard before. It was said by one of the Greek philosophers, but it's a tremendous parable to explain something in great depth. And I want to just give you that mashal now. There was a great Greek philosopher who once gave the following parable. There were a group of people who were born inside a cave. And inside this cave, they were tied up and chained, looking at the back wall of the cave. Now, they only could see the shadows of what was reflected from outside the cave. So when an elephant walked past behind them in the entrance to the cave, they saw the shadow of the elephant and they said, oh, there's the elephant. And they knew what an elephant was. It was the gray one that was a little bit taller and wider with 4 stompy legs. That was the elephant. Okay, they know what. And sometimes a giraffe would walk past behind them in the cave, and they knew exactly what a giraffe was. It was just like an elephant, but a bit thinner and a bit taller. That's the elephant. And it was also gray and 2-dimensional. And many, many things passed behind them on the cave, and they knew how to identify all of those things as the 2-dimensional gray flat images, sometimes a bit wider, sometimes a bit taller, but they knew how to relate to them all. That was their imagery of the world that they had. One day, one of the people broke out of his chains, and he was able to turn around and look at the back wall. And suddenly he saw an elephant, but in its real form. And he saw a giraffe in its real form, and flowers and trees and birds. Now, suddenly, not only were they 3-dimensional, but they were also with great color and texture. And there was a whole new rich world that he was able to experience that he wasn't able to experience until now. That's the parable. The 2-dimensional, the parable of the people who were born in a cave. Now, you could take many things from this parable, but what I want to take from it is a lesson for emunah. We live in a world where we see things as we see them. And we could attribute them to all the natural causes of what we see, which is in front of us. And that's 2-dimensional and flat and gray, because we don't see any depth behind why things are happening the way they're happening, if there's more meaning to them, and if there's color behind them. But a person who's able to break out of the this world image and not see things just as cause and effect, just as you see the flatness of this world as happening just because it happens, but rather you're able to see that there's a whole world of understanding and meaning behind it, where you're able to ask, okay, I know that's what is, but I'm also asking, why is it like that? Science doesn't usually ask, why is it like that? They only ask, what is it? And they go and measure and clarify. And if they ask, why is that way, they're really asking, well, what would happen if you would change this variable or change that variable, or what other cause is a cause that came before it, but not from an emunah perspective. Why would Hashem make it that way? I mean, there's no master design behind the whole thing that they have to get into his rationale. They're just trying to understand what's going on and why is it happening that way. That's a major concept of emunah. And that parable could be a very useful parable for you. So when you want to think of emunah, you can think on using that parable on those terms. You could say, the world, the way I see it right now, is the way that I see it. But there's a lot more depth behind it. And if I view from a Kadosh Baruch Hu's perspective, it's a much richer world with a lot more meaning and a lot more depth. That's a valuable parable just there. But how are we using it in this context? Someone who steals, he's aware that what he's doing is wrong. Someone who borrows and doesn't pay back, he's not aware that what he's doing is wrong. Or if he is, it's very easy for him to justify it. And then he says, well, that's just the way of the world. Look, the world goes like this, that I need money, he has money, I'll borrow from him. If I'm able to pay back, I'll pay back. If I'm not, I'm sure it'll work out. Everything always seems to work out in the end. And he looks at the world in 2 dimensions. Well, he has and I don't have, so let me borrow. And if I can't pay back, well, I can't pay back. So what can I do? I'm kind of exempt. I need the money more than he does. Isn't that a fair, logical thing of how you view it? Steal from the rich, give to the poor, and everyone is able to function in a normal way. Now, if you're asking if that's true, it really is true, because from Hashem's perspective, Hashem will work it all out. Hashem will ensure that the person who lent the money won't lose out from it, because someone does a mitzvah, never loses out from doing the mitzvah. And this poor person, this borrowing person, let's say, they will end up losing the money in some other way. And that's what it's saying over here in the continuation. There's a natural order to the world where if you've borrowed from someone, even if you don't pay them back, it's as if you've borrowed from Hashem. Because Hashem has a higher world order. There's a world order that you see with your 2-dimensional eyes, and there's a higher world order, which is an emunah perspective. And this emunah perspective is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will ensure that the one who lent the money will get his money back, and you who borrowed the money will end up spending it in some other way. If you don't give it back to the person you owe it to, you'll lose it somewhere else. That's Hashem's order in the world. That's a spiritual order. You won't necessarily see that in a checkbook. Did he return the loan? No, he didn't return the loan. But the person who lent the money will end up winning money or gaining money in some other deal somewhere else. And the person who borrowed the money, he'll end up losing the money in some other way or have some other expenditure that he wasn't expecting. So that mindset, on the one hand, for the Malvim is very positive. Now, I can lend money freely and not be concerned, because even if it ends up that this person doesn't pay me back, I don't have to worry. I don't have to be Noel Deles Bifnei Lavin and say, well, look, he didn't pay me back, so I'm not going to lend money again in the future. You don't have to worry about that. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will pay you back. You have the greatest guarantor. In the same way as if you have a guarantor on someone's loan, you don't have to worry, because if he doesn't pay back, he'll pay me back. Here we're saying HaKadosh Baruch Hu is your guarantor, and if this person doesn't pay you back, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu will pay you back. So as a lending perspective, it's a very positive Mishnah for us to learn. You can freely lend money your whole life and never be concerned where I'm going to get the money back from. Maybe he won't be able to pay. Don't worry. You do all the normal ishtadlus to get him to pay back. If he can't pay back, you don't worry. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will pay you back. That's from the lender's perspective. But there's a very tricky mindset here from the borrower's perspective. A borrower who has a crooked way of viewing things will say to himself, it's all going to work out. There's a natural order here where things just work out. Where if I don't pay back, don't worry, he'll get his money back from somewhere else. Rashi says it explicitly, that he'll get his money back from somewhere else. And if I don't pay, then okay, things will work out. Now, this is a very unhealthy emunah perspective. This is a perspective of, if Hashem runs the world, then it's okay if I don't do everything in a legitimate way, because Hashem will anyway enable everything to work out and everything will be fine in the end. For this, we need a pasuk to show you this is not true. Now, why do you need a pasuk here? We've just explained that all this Mishnah doesn't need psukim. So why here does it need a pasuk? Because here there's a crooked mindset that a person is using a Torah concept against the Torah. He's using a mindset which Rashi explains the Mishnah, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will ensure that all the people who need to have their money will get their money in the end. So the person borrowing money might say, well, then if that's the case, I don't need to return the money. He's using an emunah in a crooked way. That's not allowed. Who's going to fix him? Well, the world won't fix him, because the world, there are natural ways of the world, but we've got a problem here, not in the world, we've got a problem here of emunah. He has a false view of emunah. So therefore, we need to bring a pasuk to fix him. What does the pasuk therefore say? Loveh rasha v'lo yishalem. If a person borrows without the mindset to return, and he thinks to himself, don't worry, Hashem will work the whole thing out, he's called a rasha. And you're thinking, a rasha? Oy vavoy. But didn't we just learn that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will arrange everything and everything will work out in the end and everyone will get the money they need to get it? That's none of your business, excuse me. That's Hashem's business. That's Hashem's way of working things. That's an emunah perspective from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but not for you. You're not allowed to take all those rationales into account and say, well, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will pay the money back in the end. It's as if I'm borrowing from Hashem. Hashem will work it out. Hashem will pay him back. That's none of your business, my friend. Tzaddik chonein v'notein. It could be that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was a tzaddik, and he will grant and he will return that person, but you will still retain the name Rasha. Even if you're saying from an emunah perspective everything will work out, you're not allowed to do that. So if someone's looking for what's yashar, they won't get to this mindset. But if someone's using emunah rationale, they may. And therefore here you need a pasuk to fix them. So in summary, the 2 points that we made today. Point number one was that anything negative is more of a motivating factor than positive. And you will find yourself rationalizing, not having to fix yourself, because you'll say the bad isn't so bad. And therefore it is extremely important for you to clarify how the bad things are negatively affecting you, so that you can then see through on fixing yourself. And that was what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was encouraging his Talmidim to do. That was point number one. Point number two is Rabbi Shimon ben Netzanel, on his positive side, said, Ro'eh es hanolad. If you wish to have if you're a man of Yireh Chet and you're concerned of all the negative consequences that may occur, always look long-term for the future, how that could affect you. That's the positive side. Now, a man with Yireh Chet, a man with a great level of Yirat Shamayim, what's his flip side? So on a simple level, his flip side is he just won't plan ahead properly and he'll take a loan and not be able to pay it back. But on a deeper way of viewing it, someone who has Yireh Chet, there's a danger on the flip side that his Yireh Chet, or we're expanding it to his Yirat Shamayim, he might have not only Yirat Shamayim for himself, but also Yirat Shamayim beyond boundaries for other people as well. And he might say, I can borrow, and don't worry, Hashem will work it all out. Don't worry, HaKadosh Baruch Hu runs the world, and since Hashem runs the world, everything's okay. And he'll borrow money with a false sense of emunah. He doesn't have to worry. And if he's not able to pay it back, okay, that's beyond his control. That's Hashem's problem. Meaning he's trusting in Hashem in a false way, that Hashem will work everything out and pay back people who need to get paid, and everything will be okay. That's a false way where a person is losing boundaries. Someone who's ro'eh es hanolad, he's looking for boundaries. He's seeing, I see what I'm doing now, but I want to look how that will affect beyond the boundary of where I am now. I want to take beyond boundaries into account in a healthy way. This person is taking beyond boundaries into account in an unhealthy way. He has emunah, but it's a false sense of emunah. He's going beyond boundaries of emunah, but not in a healthy way like the ro'eh es hanolad is doing, where he's saying, I know I need to do this, but I want to do more for Hashem, I'll do that. He's saying, I believe in Hashem so much, I believe Hashem is infinite so much that I can even not pay back loans, because don't worry, I trust in Hashem that it will all work out in the end, even though I don't have any plan of how that's going to happen. And even if I can't pay back, that's Hashem's concern, not mine. You're not allowed to do that. That's a negative mindset. That's a mindset where a person is going beyond the boundaries, but not in a healthy way. Now, he won't necessarily see that in the world, because he's saying, but from an emunah perspective, who needs to look at the world? I have emunah, and emunah will see me beyond all those things. Okay, 1 second. You're saying from an emunah perspective, then I need to teach you a pasuk that will realign you. And that's question number 3. Why here are we bringing a pasuk in when everything else is just what you see naturally? Because when a person starts claiming in the name of emunah that he can do things beyond boundaries, then we need to show him that's against halacha, that's against Torah. Don't give me that claim. And therefore, loveh v'lo yishalem, you know what he's called? A Rasha. A Rasha, chas v'shalom, I never intended to be a Rasha. I was just trusting in Hashem that it would all work out. You're not allowed to do that. Trusting in Hashem that it will work out without making a plan, Hashem will make it work out. Tzaddik chonein v'notein. Hashem is a tzaddik and he gives infinite and he will make it work out, but you still will remain with the label of Rasha. You're not allowed to go beyond those boundaries. And that, my friends, is the conclusion of the Mishnah. Baruch Hashem, in a very thorough manner, we've encompassed all the different elements of the Mishnah, all the praises, all the traits that the people have, those 5 to 9, all what they found in the positive, the one idiosyncrasy in the negative. We've resolved the whole thing and got deep clarity in it. And we now have the 5 major pathways in Avodas Hashem. If we're very zoche, then not only will we continue and go on and see what these 5 to 9 have to say, we may even try and link it back to the 5 points, these 5 pathways that we've said until now, and see how the 5 things they say are even expressed in their statements. They say that's going to be a much harder mission. It's not going to be as smooth as it was now. We'll try and do it. But either way, Be'ez Hashem, tomorrow, Rabbi Eliezer Agodol, Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanus has 3 things to share with us. We'll tune in and we'll hear his words of wisdom. Yashar kochachem.